Hello, and welcome to the Facebook premiere, Blinded by Who or the What. I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for tuning in this evening to listen to this next episode. And hopefully you will find this enlightening and encouraging and inspiring. But, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable. I don't know why I keep talking about these things that are going to make you uncomfortable, but I really do, because I continue to share with you that when you're comfortable, you do not grow. When you're uncomfortable, it stretches you to grow. So this evening, we're going to be stretched. We're going to do some exercise, and that's okay. So let's just hang on for the ride, buckle up our seat belts. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but it'll be a safe landing. So that should give you some sense of comfort that it's going to be a safe landing. So let's talk about this idea of blinded by who or the what. Now, our running theme is a place of healing. So everything that we're talking about each time I get on here is relative to emotional injuries, how we can heal, just the different dimensions of how we're injured, and the various ways that we can allow our healing to begin. So in light of this title, Blinded by Who or the What, I want to start you off with this concept that in this terminology, I'm actually talking about our emotional blind spot. And that blind spot is created through either a who or a what, or it's a combination of both. Sometimes it's who and what. But when we think about the blind spot from the technical term, or from the term that we think about blind spots as we're driving in traffic and we say, oh gosh, I couldn't get over in the other lane because when I got ready to get over, I realized that person was in my blind spot. So that definition is where the optic nerve and blood vessels leave the eyeball. Now that's the terminology, and that's the definition for what we deal with when we're talking about that blind spot and how it affects us in traffic. It's the optic nerve and blood vessels leaving the eyeball. So we get that. Everybody's experienced that at one time or another. You're in the traffic and you didn't realize somebody was closer than they were and you couldn't get over. Blind spot. But the blind spot we're talking about today, as it relates to this emotional, is when our logic and reasoning leave our emotions. I'm going to repeat that. What we're talking about today, when we say that blind spot, that emotional blind spot, is where logic and reasoning leave our emotions. They're no longer part of the equation, and we are driven purely by our emotions. Thus, we find ourselves operating in an emotional blind spot. So we can be guilty of this because of relationships we have with people and the image sometimes that we have created for that person or persons. Let's talk some more about that. So we're going to start off, we're going to talk about blinded by who. Now, who are we really contending with when we have these blind spots? Who are those people? There's a certain group of people that we're easily blinded by because of the relationships we have with them. Who are these people? People that are closest to us. They're the very ones that tend to be in our emotional blind spot. So this is where we're going to breathe. We're going to do that. We're going to breathe. We're going to exhale, because nobody's going to like this. The blind spot as it relates to the who. Yeah. The blind spot that we typically struggle with, that emotional blind spot, is when we're dealing with close friends, spouses, children. Blind spot That blind spot exists because of the emotions that we have. We love, we care, they're close to us, we're protective of them. So it's very difficult to see things for what they are, because these are people who play a very important role, a very intricate part of our lives. So it's difficult to go ahead and open up this situation and deal with it for what it is. First of all, let me back up just a little bit. As we're talking about these emotional injuries, and now we're talking about the emotional injuries that are inflicted by people who are close to us. I've always said, and I will continue to say, emotional injuries happen even with people on a level that is not intentional. So sometimes we can be hurt, and we know that. We can be in a relationship, a friendship, whatever, and we can be hurt by something that's said and done. But it wasn't intentional. It wasn't malicious. And it was random, a one-off, just something that happened, and we had to walk through it and talk through it and apologize and move on. That I understand. That's something that's going to happen. That's a cycle of life, and we can be totally okay with that. However, when we're talking about emotional wounds or emotional injuries that are frequent, sometimes it's a repeat offense. It's something that you've even told someone, hey, you know, that really hurts me when you do that. It really hurts me when you say that. And yet, again and again and again, we receive that emotional injury. Something's wrong. Something's wrong with the relationship, the communication, and there very well may be something going on with that individual, that they do not respect the fact that you've shared, this is a problem. I don't like what you say. I don't like what you do. And yet I continue to do this to you, already having full knowledge that is problematic. So I wanted to put that disclaimer there so that we understand it's not that people should never inflict emotional injury. You know, it should never, ever happen. But when it is consistent, when it is constant, something is wrong. So as we latch back into this concept here about blinded by who, and we say that who are people who are close to us, friends, spouses, children, and we sit here and we go, well, that can't be right, because my children would never be intentional. My children would never be constant. My children would never be consistent. My spouse would never be. My close friends would never be. Okay. And the reason why I pause like that, because sometimes there really is some other stuff going on. There's some other layers that are going on that continue to forge this behavior from that person. And it's difficult for us to accept that. It's difficult for us to acknowledge that. And therefore we have this blind spot. You know, it's a challenge when it's someone you're close to, because you got to look at that person for who they are and not for who you want them to be. And that's a tough pill to swallow, right? When it is your spouse, when it is your child, when it is your BFF, when it is anyone close to you, and people are saying, well, why do you let her say that? Why do you let him do that? Why do you take that? We have that blind spot, don't we? I don't know what you're talking about. But yet we're being inflicted with emotional injuries. And it's not that we don't even feel the emotional injuries. It's just that there's this struggle to accept where that injury is coming from. It's a struggle. So here's what happens. It stunts our ability to grow. And sometimes it prohibits the other party from growing. Well, how is that? Because we're not communicating that there's an issue. We're not communicating that when you say what you say, when you do what you do, I feel. I'm hurt. I don't like it. Blind spots can keep us captive from being honest about our emotional wounds. Think about that. If I've got this blind spot, this emotional blind spot, I'm really not going to be prone to discuss the fact that my spouse is saying something that's emotionally hurtful. I'm not going to be prone to say something to my children about something they're saying that's emotionally hurtful. I'm not going to be prone to say something to my close friends about the emotional wounds that are being inflicted. I'm not going to do it. Why am I not going to do it? These are people who are close to me. So when we can't see past the blind spot, we look for other people to accuse and carry the emotional wounds we've received rather than dealing with the culprit. Who's the culprit? Well, the close friend, the spouse, the children, that blind spot. We get stuck there because the reality is I need to be okay with this. So I'm going to make excuses, explanations, and reasons why this is happening. And if I can keep myself in that box, then I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to consider the reality. I don't have to change. I don't have to move away from the blind spot, because that's where the healing starts. Once I'm able to move past the blind spot, then some things can happen. And we're going to talk about that as we get toward the end. We'll talk about the healing process. We'll talk about removing the blind spot. But here's what I want you to hear right now so that you don't think we're getting ready to go in a direction that we're not. When I say removing the blind spot, I'm not advocating divorce your husband, dismantle relationships from your children, walk away from friends. I'm not talking about that. But we do have to move past that blind spot so that we can see full vision of what is really happening to us emotionally. We have to be able to truly address those emotional injuries and understand that they're being inflicted on us by people who are close to us. What's the reason? What's the rationality? What's the reason and rhyme to it? We're not going to know that until we start trying to address it. But we're blinded by that who. We're suffering these emotional injuries consistently, constantly. And we're making excuses for why we're being being inflicted with those injuries. We're making excuses for the spouse. We're making excuses for the children. We're making excuses for our friends. You just don't understand. And that's not really what's happening. I think you're just looking at it wrong. No, that is what's really happening. And while you are holding yourself captive to those emotional wounds, it's also affecting you mentally. So this is mental, this is emotional, and it's going on and it's happening consistently, and we're not dealing with it, and we're blinded, and we're sitting in that emotional blind spot. We're in denial, we're resistant, and I could go on and on and on about everything in that point in time that we are choosing not to do because there is the blind spot of the who. See, we don't give free passes to everybody. Come on now. We don't give free pass to everybody. Everybody is not in a blind spot. There are some people you will call out so fast until it'll make our head spin. So everybody don't get your blind spot. Everybody doesn't get the emotional blind spot. But those people who are close to us, oh yeah, we got a blind spot. We can't see. We're going to explain it away. We're going to excuse it away. We're going to talk it away. We're going to away it away. Because we need to believe that even though I'm being emotionally injured by this person, there's a reason behind it, or I'm just going to deny that it's even happening to me. Oh yeah, I took you there. We're going to deny that we are even being emotionally injured by these people. And it just keeps circling back to the fact I'm going to deny that because that's my best friend. I can't believe that my best friend would emotionally injure me consistently, constantly. I can't believe that my spouse, I can't believe that my children, I can't believe that. So let me talk to you from my blind spot and tell you why you're wrong and tell you why you don't understand. Let me excuse it. Let me rationalize it. Let me explain it. Let me give you the reasons, because my emotional blind spot says, nah, that's not really what's happening. See, what had happened was, we know that story, right? What had happened was, and as we talk through it, we're actually talking past it, in the sense that we're going past it instead of getting past it. When I go past it, then I'm acting like it didn't happen. When I'm getting past it, then I'm actually going through and dissecting, reflecting, and trying to heal and trying to change the dynamics of what is going on. So we're either going to go past or we're going to get past. And that's the decision that we have to make. But we've got to be real about this emotional blind spot when we talk about who, because that who are these people who are closest to us. And we're busy trying to protect and preserve the relationship. So much so to a fault that we're allowing ourselves to suffer through emotional injuries because we don't want to deal with it based on the who. You know, I can't expose my spouse. I can't expose my best friend. I can't expose my children. So I'm going to resist. I'm going to deny. I'm going to live in the blind spot. I'm going to act like I'm not being hurt. I'm going to act like I'm okay. I'm going to act like this too shall pass. But the reality is, oftentimes there are things that we just got to deal with them head on. We can't sweep them under the rug. We can't pretend like they're not happening. We can't let things go unspoken and tap our heels 3 times and say, I wish it wouldn't happen. And then all of a sudden it stopped. We're not in Kansas and we're not Dorothy. So we have to get to the real grit of what is going on when we reside in that blind spot, that emotional blind spot that we reside in. And we're letting things just continue. And it mushrooms. All that emotional injury mushrooms. And as I continue to say, the emotional injury and the mental health go hand in glove. And if you keep doing that stuff, you keep giving free passes, you keep wallowing in denial, you keep explaining away, you keep reasoning away, you keep excusing away, you keep doing all that stuff, you can even become physically ill. Now that I know to be absolute truth. You deal and internalize all that emotional stuff, and it becomes a mental stuff because they work together. You do that long enough, you'll be physically ill. This is no joke. And I understand relationships as it goes in terms of close relationships. I understand. I love my children. I love my parents. I love my friends. But at some point, you got to call a thing, right? It is what it is, and we just got to go ahead and deal with it. But I can't live in that emotional blind spot and expect this to go away and expect myself to heal without doing anything. So there you have blinded by who. Now we know who the who is. We know what that looks like. We know what the dynamics of that is. And I want to take you through and let's talk about blinded by what? What are we blinded by? The what is situational. It's what we believe we're receiving from a situation, okay? It keeps us there despite the emotional injuries that we encounter. In our mind, blinded by the what, that emotional blind spot. Blinded by the what. This is a trade-off here. When we talk about that what, trade-off. So regardless of the emotional injury I'm receiving, I feel like the what outweighs it. I can handle it. Subsequently, we stay in it without understanding the truth about the blind spot. So by staying in an environment because it provides, or at what we think it provides, we'll stay and we'll endure the emotional injury. We know this story. We know part of this story. Sometimes we're in a situation for certain things, right? Sometimes we're there for, wait for it. Sometimes we're in it for stuff and things. So our mindset says we're going to ignore the fact that while I may be receiving stuff and things, and it's taking a toll on me, I'm okay. Yeah, it can be verbal abuse. It can be domestic violence. It's definitely something that falls into this category as well. We're blinded by what we think we're receiving and ignoring the negative. So if it's financial security, materialistic accumulation, we can get so engrossed in the fact that we're getting that. Again, it outweighs those emotional injuries that are being inflicted upon me. So I'm going to stay with Susie. I'm going to stay with James because stuff and things, the materialistic, the financial security, I'm getting what I need in that aspect. So I can work in my blind spot, overlook the emotional injuries that are being inflicted because stuff and things. And you know what? It's really not that bad. So here we are again. We're back to excuses, explanations, and reasons. We're explaining it away. We're rationalizing it away, or we're reasoning it away. We're excusing it away. So we say we can stay in a situation and we can attempt to endure the verbal because of the security we're receiving, the stuff and things. We can stay. But we refuse to leave because we don't understand or don't want to see the freedom that's involved in that situation. So my blind spot, when we talk about the what, my blind spot is the stuff and things. Materialistic accumulation, financial security is stuff and things. Yeah, I know he says, I know she says, I know he does, I know she does, but you just don't understand. And again, it's not always a situation where we don't recognize we're being emotionally injured. It's just we think there's some sense of balance in it. We think there's some sense of balance in it. But what we don't recognize is the emotional damage that is taking place while we're choosing to have an emotional blind spot and reside in it because of stuff and things, materialistic gain, materialistic accumulation, financial security. I know what you're saying, but you just don't know. Wow. Now that is some hurtful stuff. And we'll live there for years and years. We'll live there. It outweighs. And like I said, the verbal abuse. And when we think about relationships, sometimes even in that domestic violence, where it's physical injuries, we'll stay because of what we think we're receiving. Well, he doesn't hit me every day. She doesn't hit me every day. And man, look at the financial security I have. Look at the house I'm living in. Look at the trips I get to take. Look at the car that I'm driving. I know for some people, this might really be a mind blower, but I'm here to tell you it's a very real story of what happens in people's lives. Because as long as I can rationalize that my stuff and things outweigh my emotional injuries, then I'm going to stay and I'm going to excuse it. I'm going to explain it. I'm going to give you reason to it. I'm going to do all of those things because at the end of the day, I'm willing to take the hit because of what I think I'm receiving that outweighs that emotional trauma. Because I'm even willing to play down that it's emotional trauma, right? I'm willing to play that down. Blinded by the what? Part of that is stuff and things, but there's another layer. That what also can be misplaced loyalty. My blind spot can be created by what you did for me. Oh, Lord. Now, this I really like because there's so much truth to this. We can get so confused. Blind spot created by what you did for me. You rescued me from a bad situation. What you did for me now colors my judgment of what you do to me. I got to say that again. What you did for me now colors my judgment. Get that? Judgment of what you do to me. So your rescue can overshadow the emotional injuries that I now receive on a consistent basis. If you rescued me from a situation where I didn't have anywhere to live, if you rescued me from a situation where I was a one payment away from losing my house, so you came in and made the payment, or you came in and made the payment so I could keep my car. Or again, like I said, I had nowhere to live and you took me in. So now I feel beholding to you. You did for my children when I could not do for them. Now I feel beholding to you. Misplaced loyalty that says, hey, because of what you did for me, I will allow you to do this to me. I'll excuse it. I'll explain it, and I'll reason it away. I'm pausing because this is real talk, and we better get this one because I have seen this multiple times. Misplaced loyalty, that emotional blind spot, because I feel obligated and beholding to you, I will allow you to treat me. Come on. I'm going to allow you to treat me in a way that is emotionally, what is the word? Wounded, emotionally injured, and even emotional assassination. See, I'm going to allow that because you rescued me from a bad situation. I owe you my life. You don't know what you've done for me. I take nothing away from a person rescuing another person from a bad situation, coming in the nick of time. Take nothing away from it. But there's nothing you can ever do for me. Nothing you can ever do for me that should position me to feel like you have a free pass to inflict emotional injury on me on a consistent basis. I don't know what that thing could be. There's nothing you could do for me. Keep my house from going in foreclosure, save my car from being repossessed. put food on my table, feed my children, put clothes on my back. I could go on, and there still would not be anything I would say that would allow me to make a shift and say, because you did that, I am beholden to you. And even though you don't treat me right and it impacts me emotionally, I'm cool with that. My sisters, my brothers, we got to get into the stage, right? Emotional blind spot because of what somebody did for you, and you let that overshadow what somebody does to you. Here's what I'm going to say as a side note. If I love you, if I care about you, what I do for you doesn't come with a price tag. So what that means is whatever I do for you, if I've rescued you from a bad situation, I paid for something, I bought something, I took you from a state of not having anywhere to stay to having somewhere to stay. Whatever I have done to you does not come with a price tag. It is not about obligation. It is not about being a tit for tat, or not necessarily a tit for tat, but it's not about fair exchange. I do for you, you do for me. You remember when I took you out of that situation? You remember when I paid for that? You remember what? No. If I love you, if I care about you, if I am doing something from a genuine and pure place, what I've done is what I've done. And let's move on. So if you're dealing with a situation where someone has done for you, rescued you, and they have you feeling as if you need to be beholden or obligated to them, something's wrong with that relationship. And we can't allow our emotional blind spot to prohibit us from flourishing and moving beyond. Because again, staying in that emotional blind spot leads us into a situation of compounded emotional injuries. Because like I said, these are consistent. This is something somebody's doing consistently. This is not something that's happening once every 8 months. This is going on consistently. And you won't move out of the blind spot because your brain says, you remember 5 years ago when they moved you out of that situation. You remember 3 months ago when they gave you the money to keep your car. You remember 2 months ago when they gave you X, Y, and Z so that you could still have ABC. You see, no. See, that's beholding, that's obligation, that stuff's not even real. Because if our relationship is genuine, I don't owe you anything. If our relationship is genuine, you don't owe me anything. When I do, and we're done. So we cannot get caught up in this emotional blind spot through this portal of misplaced loyalty and say, I don't care what they do to me. I just remember how good they were to me and they rescued me. So no, that's not how that should ever work. You're drilling or you're living and residing in that emotional blind spot. You can't see past it. And you've got to learn how to see past that. What did we say? We said the emotional and the mental work together. So it's another explosive situation that can take us to a place we should never be. What do we do about this? What do we do about these emotional blind spots? How do we remove them? How do we work through them? How do we change the narrative? How do we see this differently? How do we do that? This seems simple, but we're going to talk about it. I always say, and I think it's a given, but I don't want to just assume. We have to acknowledge, which is one of the things I've kind of been drilling down as we've gone through this. We have to acknowledge what's going on, which means I've got to move the blind spot. I've got to remove it. And again, it's not about moving a person. It's about the way I choose to see that situation. So instead of having pure emotions, remember at the beginning, I said that under the emotional blind spot, we were talking about the removal of logic and reasoning. And we were just dealing purely with those emotions. So in order for me to acknowledge the truism of what is operating in my life, I've got to make sure that logic and reasoning are attached to my emotions. All of that has to work together. I can't let my emotions be the driving force, because when I do that, that's when we go back to the who and the what. But if I can keep the logic and the reasoning involved with the emotions, I have a better chance of being able to acknowledge what's going on. So I have to be able to acknowledge it. I can't stop reliving it if I'm still living in it. Make sense? I can't stop reliving it if I'm still living in it. There's nothing I can do with those emotional injuries if I'm still living in that situation, if I'm still living in those circumstances, if I'm still allowing the injuries to take place. I'm always going to relive it because I'm still living in it. So when we talk about eliminating the emotional injuries, there are times we can do that if we stop allowing the culprit to inflict the injuries. And that all falls under the guise of acknowledgement. I got to be real about what's going on. So I got to start acknowledging it. Because the more we allow it, the more we're going to live in it. The more we allow the emotional injuries, the more we're going to live in it. When it comes to healing, we've got to exercise healthy selfishness. So this is the thought under action. Healthy selfishness. And somebody said, well, what is that? It's not good to be selfish. For normal circumstances, I would agree. It is not a good thing. But there is a such thing as healthy selfishness. And this just simply means understanding the urgency of removing myself from situations that keep me emotionally injured, regardless of the who or the what. That's healthy selfishness. Why is that healthy selfishness? Because we're talking about something that's detrimental to ourselves. Emotional injuries on a consistent basis, attached with mental healthiness, that's problematic. I don't want to be hurt. I don't know about you. I don't want to be hurt. So if I have to exercise some healthy selfishness in order to be able to remove myself from situations that create the emotional injury, then that's what I'm going to do. I have to prioritize what I need to be healthy. So if me being healthy means I got to deal with you and move that emotional blind spot, then I got to do what I do, right? It has to happen. It's not optional. I can't protect you out of a misguided or misplaced loyalty and say, well, I know this is consistent. I know this is happening, but that's my spouse. I know it's, but that's my friend, and I know it's happening, and but that's my child. Those are my children. No. Mm-mm. You have to be able to prioritize your healthiness, emotionally and mental healthiness, from a level that says this has to stop. So I have to remove that blind spot. I have to be able to see left, right, front, and back. I have to have full vision of what's going on and acknowledge it and accept it and be able to intervene in those moments where I know this, you know what, this is consistent. This is consistent emotional injury. Guess what? We got to deal with this. How are we going to deal with it? First of all, we're going to talk about it. Because, see, I need to know why you do what you do, and you need to understand why I feel what I feel. Because if we can get to the grit of that, we may be able to resolve this issue. Because, like I said, there are instances where you can tell a person when you say I feel, and that person will still continue to do and say the exact thing you said is a problem. So now we got to figure out, if you love me, what are we doing? You said you love me. I'm telling you what's hurting me, and you continue to do it. Help me understand. And like I said, I'm not advocating leave your husband, leave your wife, disengage yourself from your children. But the truth of the matter is, we do have to get to the grit. We have to get to the root of why this is going on. Why is this consistent? Why is this constant? Let me tell you how I feel and why I feel. And then you tell me why you're doing what you're doing. And let's see where we land. That's real talk. That's uncomfortable. It's difficult. And we don't like to do it because these are people we love. We don't like to do it because we're dealing with that what stuff, that misplaced loyalty, that stuff and things. See, we're dealing with all of that. So, that I don't know if I want to talk about that. I'm just not going to say anything. I don't want to lose their friendship. I feel like I owe them. Stop it. Stop it. What you have to put in the forefront of your mind, I want to be healthy. I want to be emotionally healthy. I want to be mentally healthy. And what that means at the end of the day is I got to get to the root. I got to get to the grit of why this is going on and see if we can come to a conclusion as to what needs to do so that it will cease. Now, that's probably not an easy solution, and it's not necessarily a solution, but it's a beginning. It's a starting point. Because like I said, we want to see what's in front of us, what's behind us, what's on both sides of us, to ensure that we are emotionally healthy. And I will say this, never be afraid to acknowledge your blind spot and take action for healing. Never be afraid. I don't care who the who is. I don't care what the what is. You cannot be afraid to acknowledge it and take action so that you can heal. That is what you're going to need to do. I hope this has helped you in some shape, form, or fashion. I always enjoy doing this with you. And like I said, I do recognize more times than not, there's probably some uncomfortable conversation in this. There's some difficult hurdles to overcome, but it's all part of that process of growth and development and stretching you. If I got on here and just made life look so peaches and cream and everything is coming up roses, that wouldn't be as helpful. And it's not to say that life is full of gloom and doom, but there are some reality checks that we have to make along the way so that we can become our very best version. And that is what I'm striving for. Every time I get on here, I'm hoping that I'm saying something that allows you to be a little better today than you were yesterday, something that allows you to be a little bit more healthier mentally and emotionally than you were yesterday. And if I can accomplish that, then I am forever content. And I am grateful for you sharing this time with me. So until next time, I want you to be courageous enough to be present in the truth. Thank you again.